Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We don't know where we are in this world, but we just want to connect with everyone. Today, I am privileged to interview Jen with her brand new book, fresh off the press, everything to do with generosity. The title of the book is Understanding Giving Generosity. Is that it? Giving
Forgiving
Generosity.
journey.
Okay, Giving Journey. So tell us who you are and what you're about. We'll start that way.
Yeah, so my name is Jen, and I'm online as Jen Inspiring Coach because people tell me I'm inspiring. So I inspire people to become their best self. And I live in Boston with my husband and my son. And I'm a transplant from Trinidad and Tobago, a tiny island, the most southern hemisphere in the Caribbean, right next to Venezuela, except we don't speak Spanish, which I wish I was speaking. But yeah, so that's me in a nutshell.
There you go. So, what inspired you to start the giving or being generous for you? What is it that?
Well, it didn't start anywhere except in my home, which is where when I grew up, I saw it lived out. There wasn't a name for it, but I now looking back, I saw that my parents were generous people. And I in the back of my mind, I just chucked it like, okay, they're just helping people out. I didn't know that was that was who they were. It wasn't a lifestyle, it never ended. It was just who they were. And I saw it growing up. And in fact, in the book, I have a lot of stories in the book that talks about how I was very self-centered and selfish as a child, like most kids are, and only thought about, ourselves. And when cousins or people came to stay over, my mother would sort of put out the best linens and she would put out the best stuff. And we never like got any of that. And she treated people so well that people always wanted to come back. And today, at 84, she still does the same thing. So it started there, but it didn't start in me until way later.
So it's kind of like your mom was causing the ripples of generosity in you. You just
100
didn't practice it till it clicked, right?
clicked, yeah.
So, what was the moment in your life when you felt like giving was truly impactful for you, to you, or for others? Well,
It's
how did that?
it's interesting. It happened at a really bad time. It happened at a sad time, meaning it didn't click for me until I was at my end. I
Oh,
had gotten fired from a job and I didn't know what to do. I was really feeling a lot of self-pity, which is my go-to. Sorry for myself, poor me, wah, wah, wah. And then I had a spiritual mom who sort of gently nudged me to stop it. She didn't say it in so many words, but she said to me, she mentioned the word serving others. At the time, I was at my lowest.
mhm.
And it didn't click to me. I'm like, why would she say that? Why would she say that when I need the help the most? But this is my self-centeredness, right?
Right.
But I loved her, and she still is my spiritual mom. I just spoke to her today. I loved her, and I believed her because she was generous. She was going into prisons. She was going into shelters. She was on the streets of the worst and loving the worst of the worst. And I saw it. I saw it lived out. And again, second attempt to show me generosity. But it did. I'm like, oh, that's her. She's older, right? But that's not me, right? And why would I do that when I'm in pain? Like when I'm hurting? Again, this is the whole self-centeredness. But because I loved her, because I knew her, and because she lived a life of generosity, I said to myself, okay, I'll try. And that's
Ah,
and when I started, when I did it, then it clicked.
awesome. So, how has your faith upbringing or personal values shaped you to approach with generosity? Your approach with generosity.
Well, I think, I think generosity I don't think it starts out of the blue. I think it starts with gratitude and contentment. And I think those are, kissing cousins of generosity, which I wrote in the book. It's almost like you can't just wake up one day and say, oh, I'm going to be generous. There has to be like, it's almost like a garden, which I talked about in the book. It's like you're sowing this garden and you're putting beautiful things in the garden, and it's gratitude. I'm grateful for what I have, right? And that gratitude germinates just like a garden, Uh, but weeds come up along the way, right? So when you sow flower, weeds come up. So those, selfishness and self-centeredness and all the things that come up, and you constantly have to tend that garden, which is your heart, to keep it free and clear so that you can then be contented and grateful and just, you know, giving. So those things were a big part of what I had to learn. I mean, I grew up with it, but you don't just come to be generous by osmosis. You don't just wake up one day and say, oh, I'm just this generous person. No, it takes time, it takes practice, and it takes a cultivated heart that has to be tended to just like a garden in order to begin to have a generous lifestyle. I call it a lifestyle of generosity. You're muted. I think you're muted.
I think you're dead on there about that, because I think when it comes to values and virtues, I think we have to, put our 2 cents worth into how do we apply all these things that are good for us. And
Yeah.
until we feel a tiny effect that makes us want to do more, that's when the ripples of grace and gratitude and abundance
You got
grow.
it. Yeah, yeah, you
So
got it. And adding those to it, grace, a huge one is grace and gratitude and contentment, because in our society, those things are not applauded. Those things are not mentioned. They're not even, I think every school should have those virtues as even a lesson plan. But it's not touted as something that we should seek after. It's actually like, okay, we don't want that because it's
it's
not
there, it's
it,
there, but we
yeah,
don't.
but we don't, it doesn't really do much, so
Whatever.
whatever. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So who was it that influenced you the most in your giving habits?
100%, which is the book is based on my mom. Like she embodies generosity oozing out of her. Like, if it's almost like that's what she knows, and there's nothing you can do about it. When it's always something to give. It's like she oozes out giving. I mean, I've seen other people in the past, very much givers, but I lived with the woman for my life, so I saw it in every area of her life. This is not something she did when we were younger. This is something that she embodies today at 84. So it really, it sometimes when things are so close, you don't see it until you leave and you're like, wow, wait a minute, I grew up with generosity and I wasn't generous. What happened?
Sometimes we're not aware of the things that surround us unless we use them and apply them. I think I'm discovering all kinds of stuff that I was like, oh, so that's what that's about. And it's
Yeah,
like
that's right.
the older I get, the more I think this has everything to do with you start accruing wisdom, because like all of a sudden you've
Yeah.
seen it, you felt it,
Yep.
maybe you resembled it, but it didn't apply,
Didn't apply it. So I can watch a dance video all day long, and if I do not practice that dance, I am not dancing. I'm just
That's
watching
it.
the video. Similarly, growing up watching my mom, it didn't, generosity didn't ooze out of me. It didn't come on me. That's not how it works. I wish it did. It had to be implemented and installed and practiced daily. And that's when you know that you're changed, because you're practicing that virtue, and that virtue is now becoming you.
And I think in generosity, I think people associate, to me, and
Mhm.
when I was growing up, generosity was something,
Yeah,
giving something. But
yeah,
now I see it, you don't have to have something to give.
that's right.
It's how you interact,
Yeah, yeah,
what you offer as far as a listening ear, a
yeah,
hug, a
that's right.
smile.
Yeah.
And and that's when abundance,
Mm.
starts coming around you, and you're like, okay, I got goods. I got goods to
Yeah,
give. They
yeah,
you can't tangibly touch them, but you can feel them. And
right.
those are more, I think, impactful for the world as a whole, instead of just, something short-lived that you had it for a little while and it's gone away, it withered away, it got stolen, whatever, that kind of thing. So we have to hang on to generosity in one way, shape, or form and share it with the world. But
And share it with the world, which is a part of it is I gave a lot of examples of how parents can help kids to become generous and how to do this as a family. I have a lot of practical tools in the book around, creating a life of generosity for your family and leaving that behind because we will leave a legacy one way or the other. And part of it is building and leaving and living a life of generosity. And how do you do that? How do you begin to help kids to do that and not feel that they have to be you? Like they have their own way, like you mentioned, you don't have to physically give something, but there's so many ways. And I think I listed about 52 ways. And of course, there's more, giving people a matrix and sort of a step-by-step plan of how does that work? People say, where do I start? And there's, now it's scripted, but when I was growing up, it wasn't scripted. It was just, this is who we are. We just, we just gave. But sometimes people need those practical tools to help them to sort of generate some ideas around generosity. And that's what's
amen. So, what is one simple trait that a person can begin today to cultivate that generosity?
again, I would say, the having a practice. I wouldn't say an attitude because the practice comes before the attitude. Having an attitude of gratitude. I'm not talking grateful for the hard things, the bad things, right? The sad things. I'm talking about grateful for just the small things. And it starts, people think it's the big things. It really starts with the small things and the small things and the simple things.
Yeah, and the I guess recognized things in my book. It's just being alive. You have to be
Yes.
like I used to see all that domino effect of everything bad that happened to me, where I didn't even realize there was goodness in all of it because it was all focused on the negativity.
That's right. That's right.
But then you start appreciating the fact that you're alive, the fact that you this and that, and then you're
Breathe
like,
and you have two legs. And so when you drill it down to the very basic, you have no choice but to cultivate a heart of generosity because it's really the simple things that make people happy. I can't remember a toy that I received at Christmas time, but I remember the hugs that I got. I remember the baking of the bread, the ham. Those memories, those core memories flood me every Christmas time. And I don't even have to be quote home.
yeah.
It just floods me because you mentioned you don't physically have to give things. It's the impact of those relationships that it had on me that made me feel loved and special. And those were generous things I didn't see at the time. I
Mm-hmm.
just saw them as, oh, people coming over, people love us, people like us. But generosity, they didn't give me anything. But they gave me their presence, which I say is the most important thing. The
Amen.
presence of someone is the most, not the present, the presence.
Correct.
The-
Yes, because you feel you exist and you're recognized,
that's
you're
right.
acknowledged. And
Yes.
I think if everybody met that trait that I'm being listened to, someone is paying attention to me,
Yeah.
they start believing in themselves a little more, safe, life gets dealt a bunch of rough stuff to you. You don't see that, you don't notice that, but within all that, you're still around. Something triggered you to continue. Something triggers you and inspires you to build that hope, that joy, and nothing better than generosity to get that building block started. So
Yeah, and I mean you have been really generous to me. I mean you've helped, you've connected me to things I would never have imagined. You've counseled and coached me. You've shown me a path, am right? So, generosity, sometimes chapters close, seasons close, and you move on, but that generosity stays with you, right? That kindness that someone showed you, a word that someone spoke to you when you were really down, all of those are generosity. It's not the money. Trust me, it is not necessarily the wealth because that comes and goes, but it's how somebody made me feel, is the kindness, the patience, the grace that I received. That to me is leaving a legacy, like 100%. And that is
that
generous.
That is the richness of life. And if we really focused on that, everybody would feel rich and they would
That's
feel worthy and they would feel
yeah,
possibly capable of anything and everything if they
that's
had that mindset. So
that mindset.
thank you, Jen, for sharing that. Everybody needs to pick up this book and get debriefed on the steps to becoming generous, because I think we're losing a lot of that in this world. And if we gotta band together to use the stuff that works, and that is important, to be generous with yourself as well. You have to be.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that because and in fact I was thinking about doing a workshop on that because so many people are unkind to themselves. And you can't be generous and unkind to yourself. Like it's a practice. And of course, if you've had trauma or if you've had a hard childhood, it will take a lot of practice to be kind to yourself, to love yourself. However, you cannot be generous to others and not generous to yourself.
Like
Like
anything else, you can't give it if you don't have it and you haven't lived it.
you
So
haven't lived it. So that is it, and the book has many, many other stories with the four other authors, but stories would make you cry, would make you laugh, would make you, oh my goodness, it takes you through this sort of inner journey of generosity, and the stories are amazing in there. So I hope that people can pick up a copy. It's on Amazon.com. Her Giving Journey: Women Who Inspire Generosity, and give it as a gift for Christmas, and create a trailblaze of generosity in your family, in your community, in your church, everywhere you go. It is the gift that keeps on giving. So I appreciate you, Martie, and I just love how generous you are with your platforms and your stories, and you've inspired me to become even more generous.
thank you. So what message would you give us now, since we're approaching Thanksgiving?
Oh my goodness.
And what something that resounds in everyone's heart, or
Mm.
that resounds in yours, that says, we got this, we could do this kind of thing. What
Yes.
do you recommend?
Ooh, I really like the practical. I'm just, I'm not a theory person. I just like to drill it down to the practical. And for me, I say to people, don't let Thanksgiving be once a year. Please don't let it be once a year. Create a habit, create a lifestyle, create a momentum of Thanksgiving, gratefulness, gratitude, generosity, whatever you want to call it. And this one simple thing I say to people: use a simple journal, leave it at your nightstand or wherever you settle down before the night, and use this as a way to begin to look throughout the day and say, what is the one thing? You don't have to do 3, 10, whatever. You can do many, but start with one. I like to say small steps leads to big results. And that's how I started 25 years ago. I started to journal. Um, and I haven't stopped since. And it transformed my life because you're taking something from out of your head onto paper. You're seeing what's in there and you're putting it on there. And I can look back at my journals, and I've had many journals. And sometimes I don't even believe some of the stuff that I wrote. But what it is that it's an inner journey to what your thoughts are. And you're just taking your thoughts and you're putting it out. What is the one thing today that I feel really good about, that I'm thankful for? There are a lot of people focus on the negative. I made a mistake, and me too, I get there. But you disqualifying the positive things, and then you're
Mhm.
dwelling in the negative. How do you think that's going to make you feel? Of course, it's not going to make you feel good.
No.
You look back and you say, you know what? I smiled at a stranger today. I said hi to someone today. Those small things will build up your spirit and give you these feelings that no drug can give you, no medication can give you. It is like a good feeling that you get on the inside. And you do that every day for 30 days. Please drop in the chat how you feel after. You will not feel negative after. You will not feel down after. You will have some ebb and flow. But that is the one simple thing I really challenge people to do for the next 30 days. Don't wait until 2025. Start today. Start today.
I agree. And I think part of my journey was that I couldn't see the good stuff happening to me
Right.
because I was ungrateful. I didn't, I didn't thank
No, Marty, you were never
God.
ungrateful.
Yes, I was. I was not grateful for anything because I didn't think I should be thanking anything that happened to me. But honestly, when I started counting my blessings,
Mm,
that's when I started opening my eyes and my heart because
mhm.
it does affect you that way. So I recommend everybody follow Jen's orders of the day to at least practice for 30 days how to be grateful before
Practice
the
for
year
30
is up.
days. Practice for 20 days. Just practice for 1 day and tell me if that makes you feel worse or better. That's a challenge. Does it make you feel worse? I'm not talking about the messes that you make. I'm not talking about the mistakes that happen. I'm just saying, what is one thing today that you feel really good about? And that's it.
That's it. And just the fact that you have time to sit down and evaluate, you should be grateful for that. Most
Yes,
people don't get that chance. So
that's
you
right.
start with the little baby
Yeah,
steps and work your way, and you
little
will
steps.
be wonderful, like and very grateful for many things. So
Little
thank
steps.
you, Jen.
Thank
Have
you.
a blessed Thanksgiving and thank you for sharing your story with us. I hope to see you writing many more books, sharing your legacy with everything that you have to offer for the world.
Let's leave piece of ourselves behind. That's it.
Amen.
All right.
Amen.
Thank you, Marty.
You're welcome.